Today on Country Pocket on WUSB, we have Paul Armfield. He has uh, he has a bit of a love for reading and has taken that and turned it into an album, a series of book-related covers, pun kind of intended, and some originals, which we're going to discuss, that turn out to be just about as much about life as they are about books. So, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, I wanted to start today by talking about one called bookmarks.
Okay.
Um, I like the way you almost got at you almost got at this idea that there are, whether it's events or stories or art or memories, there are these things that we put a little bookmark on in the stories of our lives, and that winds up sort of shaping us.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly that. They are, especially in our early years and up to our teens. I think there are certainly uh, books. It was inspired partly by I went to an exhibition of Ladybird books that to your American listeners may not mean anything, but Ladybird books were these fantastic books that any child of my age, any child from the 60s, well, even the 50s perhaps, but I think as 60s certainly will know, and possibly the 70s. They were fantastic books. And I went to an exhibition of the artwork. The artwork was beautiful and really charming. Uh, and better than it needed to be, I suppose, but really beautiful. And it ranged everything from books to teach you how to read, fairy tales, reinterpretations of fairy tales, books about science, books about religion. But there were books on everything, but they were all exactly the same size. They were one sheeters, I found out, which means that they were printed on one sheet because it was originally, paper was rationed at this point when these books were started. And so they were printed on one sheet. But these books were so evocative, and this exhibition had every book that they'd ever done on one wall, and I mean hundreds of them. But every single one was like a Proustian Madeline. It opened up I just had to look at this picture of, for example, the gingerbread man on the nose of the fox, and I was instantly back in my childhood bedroom. There were pictures that took me straight back to school. It was incredible. So this got me thinking, that there were these books that really are they exist deep in our psyche. These books that where they open doors for us when we're younger, and then taking that through. Also, I sit as a bookseller because I run a bookstore, and I've been a bookseller for 30 years plus. And I sit on a panel of very well-meaning people who are trying to improve literacy on the Isle of Wight here, where I live. And there's lots of well-meaning people saying we need to put the right books in front of the right children. And part of me disagrees because the books that also as a young teen, I suppose, the books that uh, opened my heart, I suppose, and the books that got in there and that I remember were the books that I shouldn't be reading. They were uh, the Stephen Kings and the likes, and the Amityville Horrors. These books that really, uh, yeah, exactly. As I say, the books we shouldn't be reading. And as a bookseller, if ever a child comes in to the shop, a reluctant reader being dragged in by the parents, the way to sell them a book is to tell them that the book is much too old for them and will probably give them nightmares. And that's the book that they'll want to read. So there was an element of that. And then also the song bookmarks goes through uh, the generations, if you like, well, through the years, from those very early years right through to late teens. And in my late teens, I discovered a series of books that were published between 1955 and 1965 in Paris, the Olympia Press Traveller's Companion. They were English books that were sold to uh, Americans and English people, English speakers basically traveling through France. They were books that would have been banned in America and the UK otherwise, or elsewhere. And they, although they sort of, were, uh, I suppose the majority of them could be classed as pornography or BDSM books and things like this. Within those titles, they were publishing authors who were living, many of whom were living in Paris at the time, who would not have got published elsewhere. So they were the first people to publish Lolita by Nabokov. They were the first people to publish. I mean, there's only 100 titles in this list. They were the first people to publish William Burroughs, so many great Beckett, and it's an incredible list of titles within this 100 titles, and I collect them. But I discovered them in my late teens, and so they sat with me as well as being something that that really made up and informed my ideas of liberty uh, and yeah, so yeah, the book, the song explores that in a much shorter time than my explanation, but it really just tries to capture the essence that there are these books that literally, as you said in your introduction, bookmark our lives and mark points of significance or moments when our mind was open to something that forms us, that lives in the depth of us. Sorry, a very long answer to a very short question.
Well, very long answers are perfect for this show. Shout out to Amityville in our broadcast radius
Oh, right,
on
yeah.
Long Island. So, hello, Amityville. Yes, I know you're more than just that one thing that happened.
But
Um,
that book, that book did the rounds. I think there was every person I knew my age had read the same copy of that book. It was dog-eared and yeah, brilliant.
yeah. And then what else? We also got book banning. That's another shout out to America right now.
Yeah.
Maybe not as good of a shout out, but certainly certainly feels very relevant. So, so uh taking you from those early bookmarks to eventually selling and recommending books. How do you know when a moment has become a bookmark or might become a bookmark? Whether it's a book or something in your life, how do you start to understand like, okay, this is one of those stories that formed me?
I don't know, but I think we all know that. I mean, I have very little time to read. I'm sure most of us do, but I think we all recognise that moment, that when there's a book that really grabs us that we're reading, and suddenly time appears from nowhere. We end up pulling out all those little bits of time from the under each rock. So just the time between waiting for the bus, you'll be reading it, or you'll just find every single moment to read because the book is that good. And those are the moments, I think, those and it but it could also be just, I think, when you're reading something and something just jumps off the page as resonating with you, and that can be a poem. I think especially do that. There are poems that appeal to you at certain points in your life that can either come as a salve on a wound or an inspiration or just something that can make you feel. And of course it happens with song lyrics and all sorts, but something that makes you feel that your experience is shared and that you're not alone in these extraordinary and overpowering feelings. So I think that there's that sort of level of consolation that can be found, especially in poetry, but also in books. There is there are books that can explore those emotions that uh, make us maybe understand our own emotions, or there could just be books that are bloody good and just make you really uh, that just resonate, that just make your life better, and there could also be books that when you're a historian that can just really bring alive a moment from the past, and make it just make it resonate in the now. So yeah, there's a million and one reasons, aren't there? And a million and one things that can just reach out from a book and grab you.
Yeah, I think as a historian, every time I come across a book on some past society where they're doing really well because they do a lot of they do a lot of trading, and even if they're conquering lands, they're very tolerant of all the different lifestyles and religions. Like there are just so many examples of that in history. It makes me it makes me just want to like shove all those books in front of people who are saying, let's shut down trade, let's be less tolerant,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that's
Well,
that's not how you build something.
there's a lady who lived on the Isle of Wight, where I said I'm from, who was married to J.B. Priestley, a name, and Chiquetta Hawk's a name, and 75 years ago this year actually, she published a wonderful book called A Land, which was really the first book that presented the English peoples as a succession of immigrants. So I think that's a book worth celebrating this year. I should be looking for a current edition of that to recommend to people. That because, like I say, that how loudly that would resonate now.
Oh, absolutely. England is you know, just wave after wave of conquerors and people who almost conquered, and then even after the Normans, there kept
Yeah,
more populations came in.
and refugees. We are. It's not just conquerors. We are a nation of refugees as well. That have been People have been displaced from elsewhere. So it's
I
yeah,
might, I don't know how much I fall into that category yet, but I think I'm, uh, I think I'm in the process of deciding.
yeah.
So, do you feel as though the things you choose to bookmark really define who you go on to become, or is it the other way around?
Uh, well, certainly, like I say, that in that song, they're about the songs that form us, and so they are things that I think there's a very different thing when you're growing and you're in those early years. The things that you encounter that inform who you are, inform who we are as people. I think in later life, the things that we bookmark are the things that resonate with the people that we've become. So I think it's very different, um, as to the things that form us, the things that resonate with the people that we are as formed, that we've become. So yeah, I hope that answers that. I think.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of putting it, and perhaps puts a new urgency on what stories we tell young people, what we focus on in the curriculum. You know, if I mean,
Yeah, I think it.
imagine how differently some people would have turned out if instead of reading 1984, they they read like Atlas Shrugged or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's there are books for us all at different times in our life, aren't there? And we all need to discover Holden Caulfield at some point, I think. And there's so yeah, and maybe yeah. I think, like I say, I think yeah,
So, um, moving on to the next track here. Um, let's chat about paperback.
yeah.
Um, when you put yourself out there as an artist, uh, what is that feeling like to you? I think you do a pretty good job at explaining it here, but what does it feel like to you, poetry and metaphors aside, to put yourself out there?
Well, the thing is about paperback is one of the things I was exploring with this is that well, we've just spoken about the books that we treasure. These are the books that we hold on to and carry with us through our lives. But there are other books that we still enjoy that we are very keen to get rid of. And these are the books that if you go to any secondhand shop or uh, you will see in abundance. And these I don't know. I'm sure everywhere I've been, the same titles, contemporary titles, come up, and it's the Dan Browns and the 50 Shades of Grey. These are the books that we devour, but don't treasure culturally. We just literally dispose of them almost immediately. And it's these books, and especially the sort of celebrity autobiographies, where I think it becomes a very sort of personal slight and very uh these are the books that it must how it must feel to go into a bookshop or a secondhand bookshop or a charity shop or and just see your your life story just being thrown away, for pennies, and it was sort of partly inspired by somebody I know, somebody I've worked with, who had written their autobiography, an interesting story, but they were invited by their publisher to go and watch their book get pulped, which I thought was a pretty cruel thing, but was a true thing. They were invited to go and see it be pulped, and that's the reality. There is as much as we treasure books, there's an equal number of books that we just treat as disposable. In fact, the majority are disposable, and I know people who sort the books for various charity shops, and they don't accept them anymore because it's just the quantity is just too vast for them to be able to handle. And certainly, I remember Penguin Books, one of the biggest publishers in the UK, that as a bookshop, when we used to return the books, they didn't want the books back because they were too expensive to process. We just had to tear the covers off and send the covers back. And then the remaining books that we couldn't give them away. Nobody would want the books without the covers. So it makes me, there's lots of things like that make me examine what the worth of a book is. What the value is. Is it just something we need to have and to hold? But certainly, like I say, in this song, it is about, and there's a video that accompanies the song, which has me as a book. And it goes from me being in prominent position in the windows of all the big bookshops to being on the shelves of charity shops or and then to landfill basically. So it is about that, and it's light-hearted. There's in to some degree, but it's almost like as somebody who would write their autobiography, especially the celebrities, that will write their autobiographies. They are putting themselves out there. They are bearing their heart on their sleeve and opening themselves up to that level of rejection, I suppose, ultimately. and certainly, as a musician, you also feel that, I've certainly come across my album in bargain bins, and you have to sort of learn to just, eat it up. That's the reality of it, really.
Yeah, how do you feel if you see your album in a bargain bin?
That's fine. I mean, the first time you think, oh, that's a bit upsetting, but I've put some fantastic books in sales over the years. The things have their moment.
Yeah, I like that idea. I know I'm going to sound like your worst nightmare as a bookseller, but I'm quite partial to the audiobook.
Oh, well, me too. Absolutely, and especially this year, I've been touring more than ever, and it's been brilliant. I've read more books this year because of audiobooks, as on audiobooks, than I've read in many many years. That's been fantastic. I love it. And it's a revelation. I'm not precious about books. I'm really not. Or music. The thing that I mean, this is this is the worst thing to say as a musician who also sells books, is that I don't understand to some extent. I wrestle with the idea that we need to own and possess books and music. That we need the physical format. I think in a society that is that is concerned with waste, they are two items that we don't need to have physical copies of. That you can read online, you can get from the library. You don't need to own a book. The music you can listen to online. You can pay the artist directly if you want to, if that's your print. If that's your principles. But why do you need to own the object? And I'm torn between the idea that it's nice that we totemize these things that are important to us, and that we want to give a value to and a physicality to things that we think are of value. Uh, but at the same time, I visit lots of places when I go and play. I visit lots of communities, if you like, that you've got your recycled clothing shops and you repurpose this and you repurpose that, and everyone's very right on. But there's also the one things you will find are bookshops and record shops, and people buying, the same people buying huge amounts of vinyl, uh, and you just think, actually, you don't. Why do we need? What is it? What's this acquisitive uh, essence that we have? That what is it that makes us want to possess these things or feel a need to have these objects in our hand? Uh, and it's yeah, I like. But like I say, that's a terrible attitude to have. Somebody who tries to sell their music and tries to sell books on a daily basis. But I do, it is. I wrestle with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, what it is, to me, both a book and an album, their ideas, their experiences, and like you said, there's just such limited time to consume all these things in your life. So if you can go about your bookshop and listen to an album or listen to a book and you know just keep working. Now you've worked and gotten those experiences. And to me, that time, time is somehow more valuable to me than any of these precious ideas of purity in art or whatever you want to call it. Just having time overrules all of that in my
Mm,
mind.
mm. Well, I think there's an important thing for modern life is to be able to find time, and I think to do all the things that, to uh, that there are out there, and to pursue your interests, because it's so much easier to pursue your interests these days. But again, it's the time is the most valuable thing, and that's why I think audiobooks are so fantastic, because you can be doing two things at once. I could, so why do I need a magazine when I can listen to a podcast while I'm walking the dog? And it's yeah. So I think it's and so like I say, on tour, listening to audiobooks is just a rare treat, and it's a beautiful use of the time. And I look forward to it. I look forward to the longer the journey, the better. And that never used to be the case. It used to be just oh God, I've got 5 hours in the car today, but I think I've got 5 hours of a book. Fantastic.
I feel like as long as the people producing that art are able to make a living, that's a pretty good system.
Again, I have mixed views about that also, and controversially, as again as I'm here sort of selling my wares, I I I I question the motivation to some extent. If money's the motivation, if you want to be a professional musician or a professional singer songwriter, I just wonder if that's the best motivation to making the best art. I think creativity is something you should. Not you that you should, but I think people who are creative would be doing that whether they were being paid or not. I think to some extent. Uh, I think what you're paying for is certainly, the artist who's creating the product is quite often at the bottom of the food chain. Uh, and everybody's getting paid first. The publicists are getting paid first, the cover designers. There's everyone in that chain is getting paid as a professional, and if there's some left over, it will go to the artist. So I think it's we can look at the people who are successful and think, yes, it's a great model, but actually for the majority of people creating, they're not making any money. They're not making as much money as the people who are uh, the industry that sells the product. So I have mixed feelings about how it should work in an ideal world. And I mean, I've always had a full-time job, pretty much, and my creativity has been worked around that, and I've got a great deal from it especially in terms of travel and meeting new people. That has been the reward, not the payment. The pay the I thought I'm in a fortunate situation now where I don't depend on anyone to distribute my music in terms of labels or promoters or agents. However, I still obviously need to manufacture the item because people want to buy it. But actually, again, as I've just said to you before, do we need a physical product? To take the physical product out of the equation, and I could just roam from town to town, play my songs to people who want to hear them, without any interference. With just doing that directly, and that would seem to me to be a very, very honest way of communicating. And my motivation for doing it would just be because I enjoy doing it. Uh, and so yeah, this I'm but I of course that's a real idealist view of
Yeah, I
things.
mean, if you're in a position to be able to do that, that is absolutely beautiful. But,
But you get my
you
point,
also have to
that
recognize that a lot of people aren't in a position to be able
no,
to afford that way of life.
absolutely, but the like I say, the majority of people creating who are in the creative, who are the creators, are not struggling to make a living. but they are supporting an industry of loads of people who are getting paid. So that's my frustration. I think for every author who sat on my shelves at work, I know that probably a small percentage of those will be making a living from it, a sustainable living.
Well, let's wow, we're getting a lot deeper into industry than I thought
Sorry.
we were going to, but it's interesting. Hot takes. I do appreciate hot takes. Let's hear paperback, and we'll be right back.